All right, folks, welcome to a special live streaming edition of MIP, and glad you could join us today. As you know, it's Thursday, and whenever it's Wednesday, so we're doing this early. Normally on Thursdays.
I was really worried there for a second, Mark.
The days are running together, but
They
we're
totally
doing it
are.
early. I'm sorry. Thursday Coast is on Thursday, even though this is not Thursday, and I'm thinking it's Thursday, but I'm ahead of everything. But we're going to talk about the importance of less than a week from now. And this will be our final analysis, prediction, prognostication with our friend, the founder of Daily Kos, Markos Melitsas, before Election Day. And so we're happy to have him here. He's been keeping our optimism levels up high. Let's see if we can keep them up and drill down into some of these numbers and see where we are and really think about what's going to happen on next Tuesday. Markos is here. Markos, welcome to Wednesday Coast. I guess it's not Thursday. Wednesday Coast, Thursday Coast. Either one.
Yeah, pleasure. I wish it was Thursday. I mean, we've been 4 years of waiting for this moment to arrive, and it's actually just around the corner, and it's really incredibly hard to believe. But we survived. We survived those 4 years, which, I think we should pat ourselves on our backs because it hasn't been easy. And now we have these last few days, and it's an all-out sprint. And I hope everybody's leaving it all on the road because we need every last vote to turn what I think is going to be, for sure, a good night into the best night. And the difference between those two outcomes is absolutely massive in terms of impact and policy. And so we need that best night possible.
Yeah. So let's start kind of where we left off. You've been focusing a lot with us on Florida. Still looking good there?
Florida, Florida. Never depend on Florida. The day we need Florida, because if Florida decides it, we're screwed. I don't trust Florida. And the early vote, it looks good, but we're still seeing weakness around Miami-Dade in Orlando, which is exactly what cost us in 2016, which is exactly what cost us in 2018. Whatever the Democrats had built, whatever machine they built there, I'm still not seeing that sort of hole in our GOTV operation in those two Democratic regions. And it's mostly Latinos. And it's not the Cuban Latinos. They vote Republican. It's more recent immigrants from Central America, and it's Puerto Ricans. They're not immigrants, but they've arrived from the island, and they're just not voting at the numbers that they should. So this is an actual long-term problem. Then, of course, there's Republican efforts to suppress the vote of the former felons, which a ballot initiative enfranchised in 2018. So there's a lot of work to be done in Florida. I'm actually more excited about what's happening in Texas and Georgia, to be honest, because Florida is going to Florida. I mean, I mean, the polling says we're going to win. But it's very, very close. And again, polls aren't votes. And if Democrats can't pull out their core Latino Puerto Rican vote in Miami-Dade, Broward, and in Orlando, then it makes it incredibly difficult to win statewide. Can we still do it? Yeah, but it's a lot harder.
Yeah. So you actually feel better about Texas and Georgia. Tell us what you know.
Yeah. Well, Georgia, for sure. Georgia was already on the path of becoming a blue state. I mean, Barack Obama only lost it by 3 points back in 2012. Hillary Clinton only lost it by 5 points. And so I don't know if you remember, Mark, but 10 years ago, we were talking about Georgia, and me going like, Georgia's the place. I kept saying there's 700,000 unregistered African-Americans in Metro Atlanta alone. And we used to throw out those numbers. And then Stacey Abrams came on the scene, and she got most of them registered. It's actually quite incredible what's happened on the voter registration front in Georgia. It's an incredible story. And the latest Civics poll, we just released a poll, I think it was yesterday or again, all the days are blending in together, but it was yesterday. And we had Joe Biden up 5 points, 52-47 in Georgia. I'm feeling pretty good about it. And even more exciting is, no, 6 points, 52-46. Even more exciting is that we are over 50% in one of the Senate races, the John Ossoff race, which would avoid a runoff election because Georgia has a Jim Crow law that requires runoffs for anything under 50%. And there's a special election, and that one, I think he's my favorite candidate of the entire cycle. It's Rafael Warnock, and we've been talking about him from early on when nobody knew what the heck we were talking about.
Right.
Warnock, we have him at 48%. We have him close to an outright majority. Now, the problem there, it's a special election. All the candidates are running on the same ballot. And so you have 22 candidates on the ballot, including Matt Lieberman, Joe Lieberman's son, who is an utter a-hole and has refused. And he's been calling Warnock the establishment, right? The head pastor at Martin Luther King's church is the establishment. And he's a total jackass. And he is getting, we've seen his support crater. I mean, Georgia Democrats are consolidating around Warnock, but there is it was already really difficult to get the 50% on that race. I think Matt Lieberman made it that much more difficult. And so that one's probably going to go into runoff in January, Mark. It's going to be World War III in Georgia. As Warnock tries to regain that seat. I could see Democrats raising $100 million for the guy in a month. I mean, it's going to be explosive, and he is legitimately an incredible candidate. So I'm pretty excited about Georgia for sure. And Texas registered just in the last 3 months. There were no. This is Georgia. Sorry, I'm even getting my Texas and Georgia's confused. 300,000 people registered, new voters in Georgia in just the last 3 months. 1 million new registered voters since 2016. That's the power of what Stacey Abrams and allied organizations have been doing in Georgia. And that's why it's a whole different picture. And so a lot of people saw this and like, Joe Biden up by 6 points in Georgia, that seems crazy. And it totally seems crazy, but no doubt about it. But given the number of new voters, given the turnout that we are already seeing, it's a different world. And if these numbers bear out, and again, I guess we'll know in less than a week, Mark, if these numbers bear out, we're going to see a Georgia that within a couple cycles will be like Colorado, a formerly competitive state that's just blue.
So I'm also hearing that what's motivating these long lines in Georgia is exactly what happened to Stacey Abrams. And it's always motivation. We saw this in 2012. When you suppress or threaten to suppress people's vote, they're motivated to go out and vote. And that really should be the case across the country. It should be, it probably is, but I've been specifically hearing that's part of the enthusiasm in Georgia. I saw just on yesterday more Twitter activity calling for Lieberman to drop out of the race. At this point, it's a week out. They can't take his name off the ballot, but he should have.
Half the people have already voted already too.
Yeah.
One of the things that we noticed in our poll is that we asked people who have already voted and those who haven't voted yet. And of those who have already voted, Lieberman was at 1%. And of those who had not voted, he was at 3%. So I wonder if there's sort of this third party effect where people think they're supporting a losing candidate. They walk in, they're like, am I really going to throw my vote away? And that's what may be happening in Georgia. But, Mark, they've been suppressing votes forever, right?
Yeah.
Something's changed. Something has changed this year. And I don't know if it's social media. It might even be just social media. People are seeing it very explicitly, and it's so blatant because Republicans are realizing they're about to get absolutely blown out of the water. The in Texas, right? That was a great example of Republican Governor Abbott limiting the number of drop boxes to one per county when you have Harris County is bigger than 22 states. Just Harris County is bigger than 22 states. And they wanted to limit that to one drop box. When you have these podunk rural counties, you know, with 5,000 people, they get their own ballot box too, right? I mean, it was so blatant. And Texas is within the next couple of days going to hit the 2016 vote total. Just in the early voting period, they're at 80 some percent right now, 85%. They are going to hit, and turnout in Harris County. And so people are not using their drop boxes, right? They're just voting in person. That's what they decided to do instead. But I am absolutely convinced that by trying to limit the drop boxes, it sent a signal to sort of peripheral Democratic voters in Texas that, oh my God, if the Republican governor is this afraid of us voting, it's because he has a reason to be afraid of us voting. And that has dramatically supercharged turnout in Texas. And Texas leads the state. I mean, it is absolutely crushing everybody in the number of people that have voted. It's absolutely the most beautiful, wonderful thing I've ever seen. And Republicans were already in trouble because their 5 biggest states by electoral votes are all battlegrounds: Texas, Florida, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, Georgia, those are the 5 big, Ohio. Those are the 6 biggest states by electoral votes are all battleground states. And some of those are trending red. Ohio's, I mean, we're looking good in Ohio this year relatively, but it's trending red. Minnesota's probably trending red because these are white rural states. Pennsylvania, it's tough, but Texas, in Georgia, in North Carolina, those 3 states are all trending blue, and there is just no world in which Republicans are viable nationally if Texas, and then throw on Georgia and North Carolina, if those states start becoming purplish blue to blue, and Texas is a blue state, it's just a question of people not voting, right? Georgia, same thing. It's a blue state, people not voting. If those states flip, it's over. It's over. They don't have a national party anymore. It's quite fascinating what's happening. So I'm really, really excited about what's happening in Texas.
So MJ Hagar, did she win? Did she beat Cornyn in
You
Texas?
know, this is a tough one. In a lot of states, the Democratic Senate candidates are running ahead of Joe Biden. Texas is one of the few exceptions. She's running behind, and she's had a name ID deficit in Texas, and it's an expensive state, and she wasn't raising the kind of money that a lot like a Jamie Harrison was raising, or in Kentucky what's her face in Kentucky was raising, which has pretty much been wasted money in a lot of ways. As much as we'd love to kill off Mitch McConnell, Kentucky's a really, really, really tough state. So MJ Hagar didn't have the kind of money she did. And now, very late, a lot of money is flooding in, ton. But about 80% of people have already voted. So I'm not sure what these super PACs were thinking, waiting this long. That might be one of the biggest miscalculations of the cycle. Now, if Biden manages to win Texas by 3 points, I think maybe he drags her over the finish line. I just don't, I mean, the polling certainly doesn't say that. The polling certainly doesn't suggest that. But if Biden wins, it's going to be one of those where he wins by, 0.5%. And I haven't lost hope that Hagar pulls it off. But I think that's going to be one of our heartbreakers Tuesday night. Either the biggest surprise or just losing by 1-2 points. It long term though, it means Ted Cruz, you're done. Cornyn, you're done. This state is moving in the wrong direction for them, and Trump has accelerated Texas's move to purple status. And I mean, just in general, I mean, Trump will have been, it's a death knell, the Republican Party. It's kind of absolutely fascinating if we can close this deal. And again, we're this close. We're 2 points, probably 2 points between a 50-50 Senate and a 55-45 Democratic Senate. That's the difference.
So you mentioned the death knell a couple times. We had the death knell in 2008. And I'm going to go back to the calculations in a minute, but I just want to say this. The Obama administration, of which Joe Biden was a member, and I just saw a commercial the other day about how good Joe Biden is working across the aisle.
Okay.
That administration, it was a death knell in 2008, and it was so confirmed. I had James Carville sit in my studio and tell me on and off the record just how much of a death knell it was, or should have been. And then there's this need, well, we're going to throw them a lifeline in the spirit of unity and America and all of that. And what concerns me is that it ought to just stay dead. And people say, oh, how can you say that? But Marcos, as you and I have discussed this before, Marcos and I have been doing this over a decade. That's why he can recall what we talked about in Georgia for over a decade. The Democratic Party is a party of one name, but it's actually a party of many MINI and MANY parties with all the different constituencies. The Republican Party is not a party. It represents solely the interests of wealthy, privileged white men. Doesn't even represent the interests of most white people.
Yeah.
So when you say let's have unity, you're not making unity with an entity that is actually serving the white folks that Reverend Barber serves. Reverend Barber could almost, we talk about Black political party. So I could say, well, let me form a Black political party. Wouldn't have to do that if African Americans took their rightful place in the Democratic Party, because there already is a Black political party. But Reverend Barber is the one who is most qualified to build a white working class and poor political party, because they're all with him. There are more of them with him than are even represented within the Republican Party. So I just hope that when people hear us say death knell, it's a necessary death. This is where euthanasia is necessary, because the longer it lives, the more confusion, disruption, disunity. We keep reliving the Confederacy. And we've been reliving that for 100 years longer than we should have. Strom Thurmond resurrected that. We keep resurrecting these old Confederacies. So anyway, that's my rant for the day. You can respond, but.
It sounds good. I mean, it was absolutely frustrating to see Democrats have 60 seats in the Senate and big House majority, and Obama winning against not even a crazy Republican, right? John McCain. But conclusively, the country's saying this is the direction we want to go. And then Obama, and you have Mitch McConnell and company talking about openly about how their goal is for Obama to lose the next election. Right. And they sat there trying to get bipartisan consensus. Now, it was a different Democratic Party. And I think people who, newer to politics don't realize it. It had Joe Lieberman in it. It had Max Baucus in it. It had Ben Nelson in it. And so these people, literally their entire brand was, we're going to be a-holes and make sure nothing ever happens, because they need to kiss our ring and rub our feet, do whatever, right? I mean, I don't know what they wanted, but they sure as heck were not in line with the Democratic Party majority, and they stymied it. And at the time, they allowed the filibuster to rule supreme, right? So you needed to get all of them aboard. Now you have a Democratic Party in the House and in the Senate that is more ideologically cohesive. Now we still have Joe Manchin in West Virginia. We have Kirsten Sinema in Arizona, who's a flaming liberal. She just plays a conservative Democrat because that's what she thinks she needs to do to win in Arizona. I think as Arizona turns more blue, she will turn more blue along with it. So you have a party that is more in tune, more in line with what we're going for. And what's really amazing right now moving forward is that you hear Joe Manchin, he's pissed. I mean, Joe Manchin has sounded like an actual Democrat the last month. Angus King, who at one point flirted with switching parties to the Republican Party, he's talking about expanding the court, right? Mitch McConnell and his party overreached in a way that even a Democratic Party that loves tradition, for whatever reason, I will never understand, they love their traditions. Oh, here, let's give you Republicans blue slips so you can block judges from your home states. Democrats didn't get that, that power, but the Leahy of Vermont gave that power to Republicans for some crazy reason. You don't hear Democrats talking that way, and even Dianne Feinstein, who presides over the Judicial Committee, she's the ranking member in the Senate Judiciary Committee. She's so mismanaged the Barrett hearings to the point where she actually literally hugged Lindsey Graham, talking about what a great process it was when Barrett didn't answer anything, literally no questions. And you have not a single Democrat would defend Feinstein. Like they tried it, and like none of them would defend him. Nobody would even say, yeah, she'll still have that job. She'll be the chairwoman of this committee next year. And so I think there's a change, and this is where having a big majority matters. A 50-50 Senate with Kamala Harris being the tiebreaker vote isn't going to get us to eliminate the filibuster, isn't going to grant us statehood for DC and Puerto Rico, isn't going to be enough for us to expand the courts, isn't going to be enough for a nationwide voting rights standard that protects everybody's right to vote. So we don't have to win by 10 points in order to actually be able to say, okay, that was legitimate. That won't happen with a 50-50 Senate because there's going to be some a-hole somewhere. It's Joe Manchin or Sinema or Hickenlooper from Colorado. There's going to be somebody who's going to be a, total jackass. It's inevitable. And then people are going to be like, the Democrats can't do anything. And it's going to be like, no, because we don't have the majority. The Senate's already an undemocratic body that preferences rural, white, conservative states. And so that's why we need 55-45. If we have that 10-seat padding, then we don't care what Manchin says. We don't care what Sinema says. We don't care if Leahy or Coons of Delaware, these traditionalists, these institutionalists, some of them aren't even conservative. Some of them are just like, we don't like things to change because the Senate should be a storied body of debate and high-minded principles. And it's like, do you see who's been running this place? You see who burned it to the ground? And it's so, you see McConnell, he sees these Democrats and he has so little regard for them that he literally taunted them as he confirmed Barrett. He literally said, there's nothing you can do about this. When everybody's been talking about, yeah, there is something we can do about this. We can expand the court. And McConnell, well, RGB said that 9 was the perfect size of the court. Like, yeah, she also said, don't freaking replace me until after the election, a-hole. Don't say those words. You're not allowed to say her name, a-hole. So that's why there's so much writing in this election. And that's why when people talk about, we don't, we're afraid of complacency. I mean, Mark, maybe you see it somewhere. I don't see complacency. I see people going like, holy crap, we can win a Senate race in Kansas. We can win Senate races in Montana, in Texas, and South. We can get rid of Lindsey Graham. People are donating record amounts of money. They're voting at record rates because I think we as a movement finally learned that the presidency isn't enough, that there is far more to it. I mean, we won a state Supreme Court race in Wisconsin in the middle of spring by 10 points in races that Republicans used to win unopposed. We wouldn't even run candidates for Wisconsin Supreme Court because we were so disengaged from what matters politically. And we've learned over the last decade and 2 decades since we've been doing this, people have learned that, that Supreme Court race actually matters. Right. And we won it by 10 points. I mean, we wouldn't even turn out for those races. We turned out for those races. And that sort of hinted that, maybe Trump doesn't really have maybe he is really in trouble in Wisconsin, right? When you win a state Supreme Court on a low turnout time of the year by 10 points, you're sending a message, and you're sending a message that we are fired up and we cannot wait to vote everybody out. So I'm not worried about complacency. I'm worried about getting the non-voters. The same thing we worry about every election cycle is the people who just don't vote, period. How do we make sure they vote? Because they're the difference between our good night and the best night. And so much is at stake with the best night. And like I said, expanding the courts, statehood for DC and Puerto Rico, a national voting rights bill. I mean, yeah.
Yeah.
And getting rid of the filibuster on day one.
Yeah, no, and we've got to be about it. And I get it too. I want to be fair. Biden doesn't have to say that today. We're going to go four corners, run out this clock until Tuesday. But after Tuesday, if he wins, you're right. First 100 days, democracy agenda. And everybody's talking about that. George Floyd, justice and policing, HR 40, a lot of stuff. People saying, let's get it going, statehood. Let's not even forget all that, you know.
And you don't even have to. When did bipartisanship become having to deal with Mitch McConnell?
Mm-hmm, right.
Why is it bipartisan? I'm going to help you Republican voters.
Right.
That's bipartisanship. It's saying, you know what, this bill, it's going to let's do a $10 trillion stimulus. And yeah, you in Wyoming, you didn't vote for me. I don't care, because this is what bipartisanship is. I am going to send you money. I'm going to save your businesses. I am going to support your local economies. I am going to make sure your hospitals have PPE and have all the resources they need to fight this pandemic and so on. That's bipartisanship, is where you help everybody. It's not dealing with Mitch McConnell.
Yeah, right, right.
He doesn't care about those people.
But just to be clear, because I always like for us to be holistic, I must be fair. The problem and the reason, you know, Biden is gun shy, and he's old school, but it's not just old school people like him. This media atmosphere that has been created with the mainstream media, that anything we do, even in defending ourselves from the right, is seen as being disproportionate to what they do to us. So the mainstream media only uses the term court packing when it comes to us in January. They never call these almost 300 judges what Trump has done and McConnell done together. They don't use the word packing for that, you know. So there's still this need. Norah O'Donnell on the 60 Minutes, as bad as the way Trump acted with Leslie Stahl, you know what stood out for me? You probably saw it. Norah O'Donnell asked Kamala if she's a socialist. I mean, just totally out of the context of whatever. And so there's still this hostility. Oh, they're going to pack. They're going to take over everything. You know, the British are coming. And so somehow we've still got, in this process, we've got to push back against that, Marcos, figure out a way to get the mainstream media to end the false equivalency. You know, so I just want to say that I'm not naive to that. It's going to be a battle. So folks, winning, here's the moral of the story. People say, well, what difference does a vote make? Well, you're right. That's just one day. Winning means working, organizing, mobilizing 365 days a year. All right, not just on November 3rd. That means November 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, all the way up to January 20th. We have to defend what we voted for and hold it accountable and make sure it happens. Okay, let's do this. You want to walk through some battleground scenarios that would make us victorious. Of those 5 or 6 key battlegrounds, do we need to win all of them? But before I do, though, we haven't talked about Michigan. That's starting to look a little crazy, and I don't understand that. But do you?
In what race?
When the presidential, they're saying it's tightening with Trump. And
we're not seeing any tightening, and Trump's pulled out. Yeah, no. That was the first state that Trump and his, they pulled out. Trump's broke. I mean, they don't have any money at this point. And it's in our numbers. I mean, we're seeing it. We're seeing it double digits Biden. I mean, it's just not close. Again, we're assuming people vote, right? But I'm not seeing any drop off on that front. On the presidential front, the big three are Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Michigan. And it's funny because some people are being triggered by the polls, because they remember 2016. And there's a whole story there. Polling's different now. It's not the same as then. Hillary was under 50% in almost all the polling. It was stuff like 46, 42. Just meant that the undecideds went to Trump. And we know that in the exit polls, right? All the polling now, Biden's over 50 in the states that matter. Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin. Wisconsin and Michigan are pretty solid. Nobody's worried about those anymore. Pennsylvania is probably about consensus. It's about +6 Biden lead, which is pretty solid. But nobody, it's still in the realm of like, okay, like let's really focus on this one a little bit. And we've been really directing our readers at Daily Kos to do phone banking in Pennsylvania. We would really want to lock it down. That's all Biden has to do. You win those three, that's it. And he actually has decent leads in all of those. Now, everything beyond that is gravy, or it's service to the Senate races. And if you look at Joe Biden's travel schedule and Harris's at this point, it actually mirrors the competitive Senate battlegrounds. It's Texas, it's Georgia, it's where else did he go? North Carolina. They're the expansion seats. But there's also down ballot benefits to those. And those we want those. I mean, we want in an ideal world, Biden wins with 400 electoral votes, right? You just want Donald Trump to walk away knowing that he is the biggest loser in American history. That would feel good. But we just need him to lose. So there's a problem though. Here's the problem with Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania is that the legislatures in all three states are Republican. They're the legacy of us staying home in 2010. See, this stuff matters. So people stayed home in 2010 and Republicans won everything. That Republican wave year 2010. And those legislatures are still creating trouble to this very day. And what they've done in those three states is that they prohibited the counting of any early votes. So they've set it up. This is the big Trump plan, right, is to win the day of the election vote and then go to court to stop the counting of the early vote.
And
now, in
three states again?
Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin.
Got it.
Arizona, they're already counting their ballots. I'm pretty sure Texas is already counting their ballots. Georgia's already counting their ballots.
Florida counts theirs too, right?
Yeah. So most states, but in those three states, because they were the three states that were seen as, I don't think Republicans expected to have to fight for Arizona and Texas and Georgia and so on, right? So they really focus on the three states that they thought would be the whole election.
What about Texas? Are they already counting too?
Who?
Texas.
I believe so.
Okay.
I believe so. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure. Now, the states that are going to be particularly interesting, not just for winning the election, we may not know who won Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Michigan. Now, it's looking to be so lopsided that we may actually know. I mean, it may be obvious by election day that Biden has won those, but let's assume that it's closer, and let's assume that the vote count drags on for an extra couple of days. What would be great is if we could win outright Florida, Georgia, or North Carolina. We are going to know who won those states on election night. And what's more is that they're early states, right? They're East Coast states. If any of those three states fall to Biden, it is impossible for Trump to win the election at that point. I mean, not impossible, but it's impossibly unlikely. That would not only deflate Trump, it would deflate the militia crowd, it would deflate the lawyers. And so his entire ability to create chaos would be undermined, if not completely eliminated. So we don't need to win Florida, Georgia, or North Carolina, But if we do, I think it dramatically reduces the possibility of violence and chaos. And so they become outsized important um, as we head into these last few days.
Okay.
And all three of those are close states. I mean, none of those are going to be blowouts by any stretch. Because those Midwestern states are looking, those Rust Belt states, it's not looking overly competitive at this point anymore.
I'm looking at Texas. It appears that they can start counting absentee and mail-in ballot. Okay, was a couple categories. There's absentee and mail-in ballot processing, but then there's absentee and mail-in ballot counting.
Yeah, it's a big difference because they're in two envelopes, the ballots, right? They're in the privacy envelope and then the mail envelope, and you're going to have about 10 million of those. So they're already processing. That just means pulling out the ballots, and then they just feed them on election day. So in Michigan and Wisconsin and Pennsylvania, they can't even take the ballots out of their envelopes
Wow.
until election day, and that's millions of votes that they have to unwrap, right? Unwrap. What do you call it? Pull out from their envelopes.
Wow, that's unbelievable. So, the Kavanaugh ruling the other day in the Supreme Court was really about it at the moment, but it kind of forecast what's going to happen. He said that any ballots that arrive after midnight in the mail cannot be counted. That's the
Yeah. No, he was a dissent at that in that decision, but it just it definitely forecast that that's part of their legal strategy, obviously, to try to block. Now, Trump isn't necessarily just ballots that arrive after election day.
Right.
They're going to try to stop the counting of all ballots that have not been counted election night, which is so patently ridiculous that you'd think nobody's going to take this thing seriously, except that they've just spent the last 4 years packing the courts with ideologues that will find some kind of excuse. And you know what's amazing with that Kavanaugh dissent as well is that he cited Bush v. Gore,
Yes,
which the Supreme Court said don't use this as precedent because it was such a BS decision to begin with that they couldn't even justify it as precedent. And two, Kavanaugh was on Bush's legal team. He was one of Bush's lawyers arguing for the counting of certain ballots. Very strategic, which ones they want to count it, which ones they want it thrown out. So that is, I mean, he telegraphed her strategy, and not only that, but it was the sloppiest piece of writing ever. He cited something that said something completely different. I mean, it was a terrible decision all around. But this just sort of, again, it's just a daily reminder that court has to be expanded because it was bad enough, and they just made it worse. And I still don't understand why Mitch McConnell, he had a 5-4 majority on the court, why he wouldn't just let sleeping dogs lie. He just, me and you, we've been talking about expanding the court for all year, right? But nobody was taking us seriously.
right.
I mean, it wasn't mainstream thinking. And then McConnell just did us a favor.
Yeah.
Just did us a favor. So, the only 3 states that are competitive that will have these counting issues are Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania. So if we can win some of these other states, then it renders them moot.
Yeah. Some of you haven't been taking Marcos and me seriously for the past 10 years. We hope you are now. You better now. We've been telling you all of this time. So folks, this is it. Get out. If you have not mailed your ballot in yet, strongly suggest you drop it off. If you have,
oh yeah, don't mail now. Do not mail. Do not mail. It's not even strongly suggest. If you mail it now, assume you won't get counted.
Yeah. So drop it off.
Drop it off.
And be sure it happens. Marcos, we will see what happens on Tuesday night. What's your gut telling you, man? Think we got this?
My gut's telling me we're gonna win we're gonna get to 50 fairly easily in the Senate. It's gonna be Maine, Colorado, North Carolina, and Arizona. We're gonna win those Senate seats. We're gonna lose Alabama. That'll get us to 50-50 Senate with a Harris tiebreaker vote, because I'm feeling good about the presidential. Of course, that's not going to get us to where we need to get. So we need more. We need more seats. We're slightly ahead in the Iowa Senate race. I'm feeling good about that. I'm feeling good about the 2 seats in Georgia. So that gets us to 53-47 Senate. That's almost where we need to be. And I think we're slightly behind in Montana, in Kansas, South Carolina, in Texas. That's the difference between a good night and a holy crap. We have obliterated the Republicans. We have a 10-seat Senate majority. We can actually get things done. I think we're going to pick up quite a few seats in the House, which is amazing considering that we picked up 41 seats last time. These are still Republican-drawn districts, and we have a big majority. And I think that majority is going to expand by at least a dozen, if not about 20 seats. It's looking pretty good for us in the House. And then there's state legislatures at stake in Arizona, in Texas. And I'm really hopeful that all this energy that we've seen at the top is actually going to permeate down to the state races. Don't neglect your state races, your down ballot races. Those are critically important. Those legislatures will be drawing the new districts, both local state districts and the U.S. House districts. This is really, really, really important. So I'm feeling really, really good about it. I think I see people motivated and mobilized, and I hope everybody takes his last few days and this next weekend to really work on getting out the vote, because again, we can reshape American democracy with things like expanding the Supreme Court and statehood for DC and Puerto Rico, maybe even statehood for Navajo Nation. There's a whole sort of movement budding there to actually give American Indians their own state. There is the possibility of, we need to have national voting standards. We can't do what we're doing now, where you have to look up, well, does Texas count the votes or not? Like, we can't do that. That is ridiculous. Everybody's vote should be counted, and there should be standards to make sure everybody is on the same page. These are things that can reshape our American democracy, but we're not going to get there unless we have that best night, 54, 55, 56 seats in the Senate. It's doable. Tough, but we're that close. We're that close.
Yeah, my man.
So Mark, let me one quick pitch: dailycoast.com/GOTV. GOTV for Get Out the Vote. We have a list. Move On and Sister District, like all these organizations that are doing Get Out the Vote operations. We have a bunch of stuff. There's something on that list that you might want to do. There's calling into Texas. There's calling into Pennsylvania. There's signing up for the Biden campaign. Like we just listed everybody's GOTV options, and I'm not a phone person. I'm just not going to do that. But so look at the list. There's other things you could do. Like I wrote postcards. Too late for postcards now, but there's still things that you can do. So dailycoast.com/GOTV. Find something to do if you're not already doing GOTV.
dailycoast.com/GOTV. Before we go, one other thing. You wrote a piece on Mike Espy, and that's tough. Mike's a friend. I have a lot of regard for him. He gave one of the best interviews I've ever heard of any politician on the show a few days ago. And this is literally, because there's a surge. We walked through some of his numbers, which don't look bad, especially now that he's saying, the white college-age students who were activated by George Floyd, okay, and got that flag taken down. We've been trying to get that flag down for 50 years. He feels like he's going to get them, but it still seems like, he believes he's going to win, but an analysis says it's going to just cut it real close. He already had a runoff with her, a couple of years ago. But man, if there was something we could do at the last minute, that winning a state that we've not had since Reconstruction.
Yeah, it would be something. We polled it, Civics did, and Trump is winning by like 15, and Espy's only down by 8, which is still tough to overcome, but it's not that big of a number. And the problem he has, it's a problem every Democrat has had in Mississippi, is that only about 10 to 18%, 12 to 18% of white people vote Democratic. I mean, if you look at a white person in Mississippi, unless you're downtown in some city, right, it's probably a Republican you're looking at. And so, and there's huge numbers of black voters who just don't, black residents who don't vote, right? It's the same problem we saw in Georgia for a long time. White people Republican, black people don't vote. That was the problem, and that shifted. And a lot of that has been this massive voter registration effort. 1 million new voters in 4 years will change things. That will have an impact. Also, those Georgia has those big Atlanta suburbs, and those flipped. Mississippi, I don't know if there's a big suburban Montgomery sort of world, and I haven't dug into it enough, and I bet you there is. So there's probably room to grow there. But a big part of it's going to be exactly what happened in Georgia, right? Get black people to, registered and get them activated to vote. And these are people who are like, why should I vote? Because nothing ever happens. And then we need to make inroads with those Mississippi white people, and young voters are definitely, a source of hope. Can we flip suburban voters in Mississippi like the rest of the nation? So there's a path. I don't know if we're there right this year, but I actually think Mississippi, if we can lock down Georgia and Texas votes blue, I think Mississippi may be my next project, Mark. That may be my next obsession, seeing how we can flip that state. And it's not a state that is very important from a presidential level. It's a state that's important from our legacy, historical legacy with slavery. And it's the largest black population of any state in the country. It's almost 40%. And we have a Senate that is already biased against, against liberals. It's biased towards rural, conservative, white voters. So let's get another state like Mississippi that its 2 seats count just as much as everybody else's 2 seats. So, any state that we can flip is helpful. So I actually think Mississippi is a candidate for the next Georgia. But let's make Georgia the next Georgia. So that's what I'm focused on right now. But I think SB is a great candidate, and I hope he keeps up the fight, because even if he comes up short this year, I think there's something there.
Yeah, I should hope so. And last thing, I promise. But you're in the Bay Area, so even though, I mean, is the state happy about the Dodgers? But in the Bay Area, I guess y'all still hate the Dodgers.
Oh no, people here hate the Dodgers.
Even
So I'm a Cubs fan, so
even
I don't have. I don't have that visceral hatred for the Dodgers that the locals here do. So no, they're not celebrating up here, Mark.
even though it's California and a pandemic.
Nope.
Okay.
No. Southern California is a whole different country. It's a whole different world down there.
Well, man, the next time we talk, at the earliest it'll be election day, but if not, the day after or something, I don't know. But folks, go again, dailycoast.com/GOTV. There's still something you can do rather than just be nervous. Be active. Turn that nervous energy and anxiety into action. So go to dailycoast.com/GOTV and see how you can get involved, or contact some of these campaigns directly. You may just want to call Mike in Mississippi and make some calls for him. Just do that. It won't hurt. It can only help. Marcos Melissa's a special edition of Thursday Coast, a day early, here on Make It Plain. Thank you, Marcos.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, everybody, for doing everything you've done to get us to where we are today. This hasn't happened in a vacuum. We built this as a movement.
Amen.